All right, thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back for that quick break. Mr. Kerry Booker, please conclude your, so that we can go to Abuja. I see Ambassador Ojako itching to get into the...
Yes, essentially what I'm trying to land on is the fact that democracy comes with costs. And the moment we decide as a nation collectively that democracy is the better form of government that we need to exercise, then we have to be ready to pay the bill. Now, that does not necessarily mean there shouldn't be any limits to spendings. It has to be done prudently, wisely, efficaciously. And I believe that compared to what has happened in 2015, INEC budget is more or less flat. Both in Naira terms
if it isn't even cheaper.
In dollar terms, if not cheaper.
If it's cheaper, because between 2014 and 15 and now, the exchange rate of the Naira to the dollar has almost...
155 to 360.
That's it. It's more than double.
But there is one thing that I wanted to raise, which is the, there has been a number of trials by the National Assembly in amending the Electoral Act. And it is there that the spending limits were supposedly to be raised.
Right. Which was what Biodun Ajijola
which he mentioned, which hasn't happened. And the president did not assent to that Electoral Act for one reason or the other. Now, it means that practically all the parties will be in violation of the spending limits, all of them.
Even the small ones who have money.
I'm talking about but there's a little twist.
Right.
The exchange rate they used in the budget is 305.
305.
305. So actually they spend $600 million. They spend more.
It's approximately 600, so it's slightly more. So
slightly,
the $545 million
it's
4 years ago.
$100 million more.
Right.
But if I throw in inflation factors.
Yeah, but you know.
But then this is for you. A viewer wants you to respond to this. He says, campaign spending, this is to you directly, campaign spending does not win an election. Grassroots awareness of the candidate to the electorate does. So it's not about how much you spend, but how much you are known and for what you do.
A candidate awareness is done through what? Through
Campaign
media
spending.
exposure. If you're going to be exposed
and
through
the media doesn't do that exposure for free.
It doesn't do it for free.
Even online doesn't do it for free.
Therefore, money has to be spent somehow. Yeah.
All right, let me go to Abuja. Ambassador Ojako, you talked, in your first response during the course of this interview, you talked about the social, because we've talked about business, the economy, the figures, and so on, even the voters, but you tried to draw out the social impact of this. Part of what we have tried to do since your last intervention was to highlight the fact that, indeed, there are these social costs to it, and not necessarily are they all negative. But in view of what you said in your first intervention and what you've heard from all the panelists since then, including the panelists sitting next to you, about even increasing the limit on the spending, because if the limit currently is 1 billion, and the proposal, which was not signed by the president, is to take it to 5 billion, and he says that even 5 billion, going by some of the elementary arithmetic, will not be realistic in the current economy, then how do you square that with what you said about some people being excluded by virtue of the fact that it's so expensive to run? And you talked about changing the system. Can you put all this together in context?
In fact, thank you for letting me intervene again. It boils down to that systemic preference which we have made as a country. As I noted, the presidential system of government in any democracy is probably the most expensive type in the whole world, in my experience, and I've been to so many places to say, it's easy for us to always compare with the United States. But that comparison sometimes doesn't bring out the facts, the real differences between the United States system, where we are talking of 243 billion naira every 4 years coming from the purse, the public purse, to fund election. In the United States, we should remember that instead of the candidates or their parties bringing money to give the electorate, to induce them, to persuade them to come out and vote, it is the other way around. In fact, the way to judge that somebody is really qualified to run for the presidency in the United States is that candidate's ability to raise the funds from the electorate. The more you're able to persuade the electorate to contribute to your campaign, to that extent, your chances brightens at the electoral place. The other difference we tend to miss is that the federal government of the United States does not have an electoral body like we have here. Every state conducts its own elections and feeds the result into the system, and that's the presidential system. So these comparisons don't always enlighten the citizen about how these things are done. Is it expensive, the presidential system? It is very expensive. And that is why I think in the 2014 conference, if I recall correctly, one of the major recommendations that was made was to create a hybrid presidential and Westminster parliamentary system, which would drastically reduce the costs of a president having to cover the whole country, spending billions of, somebody talked about somebody withdrawing 18 billion just to run an election. That doesn't seem to go well for an economy that is struggling. And one could easily say that if we adopted the hybrid system that was recommended, if we adopted that hybrid system, it will reduce drastically the cost of conducting campaigns and the election itself and the processes. And please remember that the $243 billion we are talking about is what comes from the public purse. Nobody is talking about what the political parties have to cough up themselves. Nobody is talking about what the individual candidates have to contribute, which also runs into billions. That they are going to keep to these figures is definitely not possible because, first of all, we don't even have the capacity to check how much any person has actually spent in the election, because most of what they spend is done quietly, privately, to individuals and to community chiefs and things. So it is important that we do a general, thorough review of the system we have adopted to run, to ensure that it includes and not exclude those who have talent to bring good governance and to bring less corruptive politics in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador.
The campaign system, the electoral system is prone to a lot of corruption in this country. And those who govern know that, and it should be corrected.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much, Ambassador Jacko. You have a
yeah, I was going to throw it to Ms. Obibi there because we've been talking about campaign spending and how that affects the economy, etc.
I'm not hearing anything.